Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and please give a warm welcome back to Skoda, who have been away from the channel for almost 5 years, but what a car to return to Auto Bears with, the all-new, all-electric Elroq. Now, a little bit of a backstory for you. I absolutely love Skoda. I love what the brand stands for. I love the models that they sell. In fact, I even used to sell them. And there was always a little inside joke whenever Skoda launched a new model, is that we were always late to the game. We were always that person that arrived late to the party, but we were always the talk of the party. And that was the thing with Skoda models. They might have been late to the game, but they always went straight to the top. And the same can be said with the Elroq. Now, the name is basically saying it's an electric version of the Karoq, basically due to its size. It actually has nothing to do with the Karoq underneath. It's still on the dedicated MEB platform that it shares with its big brother, the Enyaq. But the Elroq is going into a massively competitive segment where it will be taking on the likes of the Volvo EX30, Stellantis with the likes of the Vauxhall Mokka or the Jeep Avenger, Hyundai with the Kona, and Kia with their World Car of the Year for 2025, the EV3. So, I've had this new Elroq for a week and I'm going to answer a couple of big questions. Number one, what's it like? And number two, with the Elroq being once again late to the game, have they got enough to go straight to the top? Well, stick with me to find out. Now, when it comes to the Elroq styling, as you can see, this has a very different look to what we've seen from Skodas in the past. In fact, this is the first car to have their new modern solid design influence involved. And what that does involve is the high-up daytime running lights with your headlight cluster located a little bit lower down. This is a trend we are seeing with more and more manufacturers. Recently, I experienced it with Audi with the new Q6. Skoda have now done away with the feathered arrow badge and it is now replaced with the name printed out, as well as on the back of the car and even on the steering wheel. In fact, the main Skoda badge can be found on the centre caps. But let me know what you think of that little design change there. Now, what we also have is this black panel in the centre, which is referred to as the tech deck. And basically what that means is that all the sensors that usually are kind of lower down or higher up on the car are all incorporated into this panel, which I think is actually a pretty good idea. So if you do actually hit something like a badger or a pheasant, it will hit lower down on the grille, so all it will be is body damage and you won't have anything to kind of, any sensors or cameras in order to recalibrate, which can be quite expensive. Now, speaking of that grille lower down, it is nice and open to allow air in to cool the motor. We have got some ducting here on the sides to channel air through. The Elroq actually has a very decent drag coefficient of 0.26, so that should help when it comes to things like efficiency. Now, I will say at the back of the Elroq, it's not as exciting as the front, but it is easily recognizable as a Skoda, and it does look like a little baby Enyaq, and I don't think that's a bad thing, because again, it makes it recognizable as a Skoda car, but you do just need to double check if it is an Elroq or an Enyaq, because they do from the rear look very similar. Actually, saying that, from the front they look very similar as well, because the Enyaq now has this new modern solid front end. And I do think that the Elroq has got some really lovely proportions to it. It has got a traditional SUV look. I will say that all cars come with 19-inch alloy wheels, unless you go for the VRS, and it starts with 20s. But I do love the fact that there's a big chunky sidewall to them. So it should mean that when it comes to driving, this is a pretty comfortable car. And I will say as well, something I do like, although it is quite expensive, is this red velvet metallic paint. It is an optional extra, and it is kind of the more expensive paint options you can go for. But you let me know what you think of the new Elroq styling in the comment section below. Now, something I will also mention is with these daytime running lights that are very unique, depending on which trim level you go for, they either remain solid like they do here on this SEL trim, or they can be kind of segmented off and become dynamic indicators. But I will be honest, I prefer the solid one. It just looks a lot more Simple and elegant, but you let me know in the comments section below. And on that note, I think it's time that we leave the exterior of the Elroq and see what Skoda have done with the interior. Sat in the front of the Elroq, you are greeted with a really spacious, comfortable, and actually a really well kind of kitted out interior, and it feels much more premium than its price tag would suggest. And I will make a bit of a confession a little bit later on that might kind of shock some of you, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, when it comes to getting in and out of the Elroq, it is actually really easy because this is a small SUV, so you've got that raised seated position. So if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues, I do recommend having a look at the Elroq, because you do also get a grab handle for the driver and the front passenger. Also, the front door opens nice and wide. And then once you're sat in these front seats, you find that they are extremely comfortable. They do hold a big bear like me in place. And because I've got the SEL trim, it is manual adjustment only, but I have got a little handle to the side here for adjustable lumbar support. So that was a big surprise and definitely welcomed when I have got manually adjustable seats. So thank you very much, Skoda. And then with the steering, I have got both rake and reach adjustment. So it does mean getting the perfect driving position is easy. And then when it comes to interior quality, yeah, it feels just much more upmarket than the price tag would suggest. So the one thing I will say is that we have got a lot of fabric here on the seats with some leatherettes. We've got the same fabric on the armrest, but also here on the dash. And it does feel really lovely. And we've also got it here on the door cards. Higher up, we have got soft touch plastics on the dash, as well as on top of the doors. And we have got this kind of unique pattern on there where it almost feels like it's a kind of skin for the car. So that is quite unique, and I do remember that on some Skodas in the past. And then here on the center console, we have got some satin trim there and also some metal effect just to kind of liven up the cabin. But even though it's kind of darker down here, we have got some lighter headlining above, but it doesn't feel dark and dingy. Yes, we've got the kind of greys here, but it doesn't feel dull. It actually feels really quite nice and upmarket, and I love the contrasting kind of brown / copper stitching. And then we got things like the steering wheel with the leather surround to it, but it looks really lovely and premium. It is a 2-spoke, but we'll go on to the buttons and stuff a little bit later on. So yeah, when it comes to kind of getting into the Elroq, this feels like a really lovely place to be. And I will mention, in terms of design, it is very much close to what you get from its big brother, the Enyaq. Cubby spaces in the Elroq are actually pretty good, apart from one area. Now, the door pockets are of a really nice size and shape. You can get a large bottle of drink in there, and surprisingly, they are lined with fabric, so loose items shouldn't make too much noise, and that was a genuine surprise, and it does give that nice air of quality about it. Now, here on the center console, as you can see, it is a floating center console. So underneath, we have got a couple of rubberized tray areas where you can put some larger items there. But here on top up front, we have got 2 little rubber lined trays which are perfect for your phone. Now, because I've got the SEL trim, it doesn't come with wireless charging, but that's very clear that's where your wireless charging would be. And I will mention you have got your 2 USB-C charging inputs. Now, just behind there, we have got your 2 cup holders. They are rubber lined as well, and you've got the little rubber buttons in there, so you can put a drink in place and you can undo the lid without the bottle spinning around. It's part of the simply clever features you get from Skoda. Also, there is a little divider that you can remove, and you can just kind of move it along to change the size of the cup holder apertures, which is very handy. But I will say, in terms of its general size, it's not as big when it's kind of compared to rivals, and there are no plastic grippers. I will say, with the little divider, there is a slot in the middle, which is perfect to perhaps put your parking ticket in there. So I do really like that feature. And you've also got that here on the A pillar, so you can display your parking ticket so the parking attendant can see it. Then just behind there, we have got this little open tray area. Again, it is rubber lined, but that's really handy for like a pen, your key, maybe a wallet, or some loose change. And like I said, it is rubber lined, so loose items shouldn't make too much noise. And then under the armrest, we have got a removable tray. Again, it is rubber lined, but that is actually a really handy kind of size and shape. Again, you can put keys, your wallet in there, tuck it underneath, and no one can see it. But then under there, we've actually got a good amount of additional space. Again, it is rubber lined, and I'm loving this air of quality here in the Elroq. And another thing I do like with the armrest, in typical Volkswagen Group fashion, you can lift it up, rest your arm on there, so when you're on a long journey, you can enjoy and kind of, yeah, have your arm resting there. And then finally, we have got the glove box. And this is where it is a bit disappointing, because it feels very much like a French car, because you've only got half the size there compared to the actual size of the glove box door. So that is disappointing, and it does have things like the book pack in there. And also the big surprise is it is lined with fabric as well. So that is, again, giving you that nice air of quality. So yeah, when it comes to cubby spaces here in the Elroq, they are actually really impressive. Just apart from the glove box, which, yeah, that's a little bit disappointing. Now, even though this is a ground-up electric vehicle, Skoda have been incredibly clever by keeping physical buttons throughout the cabin, and they haven't resorted to loads of touch-sensitive buttons that we have seen from the likes of Volkswagen and Audi. So here on the center console, we have got a big physical switch there for the electric handbrake and a little rocker switch for the gear select. Then just below the air vents, we have got your shortcut buttons, and we have got buttons for things like the front and rear demisting, a button to activate the climate control, because that is done via the infotainment screen, your locking and unlocking and your hazard light button, a button to activate the parking sensors and camera, your drive mode select, and then your assist button as well, and I'll go on to that in a little bit. And then here on the steering wheel on the left hand side, we have got your voice, heated steering wheel and media controls, and on the right hand side we have got your assist button again, along with your controls to activate the driver data menu. And I do love the fact that we got this new design with the big kind of buttons here and little rocker for the volume select and going through various menus. We got a little switch here on the steering column, which is for your cruise control, but there is a bit of an issue with that, and I'll go on to that with my highlights and niggles part of the review. We got your main stalks there for your indicators as well as your wipers. On the right hand side, a couple of buttons for your fog lights, as well as to go through your auto lights or to switch them on. And what I do love is here on the right hand side, we've got 4 buttons for the windows, not this kind of 2 buttons and then press a button to activate the rear ones. So there's no faffing about there. And then we've got your main little kind of rocker switch there to activate and adjust the mirrors. So yeah, when it comes to the kind of button layout here inside the Elroq, I really do like it, and I love the fact that Skoda have kept the physical buttons. I will mention there is one more, which is on the side here for your engine start stop. However, the Elroq will kind of come to life when you get into the car, put your foot on the brake and then put it into gear. So really, you don't really need to use that button unless you're parked up and you just want to turn the car off. And then finally, we've got the infotainment system and the digital dashboard display. Now, I will start off with the dashboard display. It is this cute little screen kind of integrated into the dash, and it just provides you with all your vital bits of information. I don't actually know the size of it. I think it's about 5 inches. But what I like is that your speedometer is right in the center, and it's the largest kind of bit of information that's presented. Just above there, you have got things like your speed warning. Below there, we got your battery percentage and your range. And then it's kind of split off into 2 extra sections either side of it. So on the left-hand side, does things like your driver assist systems, things like radar guided cruise control. And on the right-hand side, you got things like your driver data menu. But also, if you are using the integrated maps, the prompts and everything will come up as well on there, and you can just go through them by using the little rocker switch and the buttons on the right hand side of the steering wheel. So all the kind of vital information is there on display. The only thing I will say is it can take a little bit of time to get used to, and some of the fonts can be quite small, particularly for example when you come up to a stop and you use the auto hold. It is a teeny tiny green hold that's on display, so that's just something to be aware of there. And then we come on to the main infotainment system. So it is a 13-inch screen, so it is larger than the likes of the Kia EV3. It is set high up on the dash and in the center. I would like it to be kind of turned towards me to be a little bit more driver centric, but in terms of the clarity and the presentation, it is really lovely, and it is also very responsive. Tap on things such as the main screen, and yeah, it is just really nice and accurate there. I'll just go back to the home screen. You have got things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. They are wireless as well. And we have 2 rows of shortcut buttons. So at the bottom, we have got things like the buttons to adjust your temperature and your heated seats. They kind of stay in place. That's something we've become used to with a lot of cars. We got your shortcut buttons like your home, media, phone, maps, and then we got a couple of buttons for like apps and stuff and going into media like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And then they got in the center is your main screens. So if I tap on the map, that appears and that's taken up the middle part of the screen. And then we've got the shortcut buttons at the top here. Now on the left, they're all things to do with kind of connectivity. So your profile and connecting to Wi-Fi, things like that. But on the right hand side, this is where we got some very, I would say, clever shortcut buttons. Now I mentioned an assist button here in regards to the shortcut buttons below the vents. There's another assist button here on the screen and another one here on the steering wheel. So 3 buttons for the same thing, and I wonder what they do. Well, if I tap on it, it brings up all my driver assist settings. All there ready to go. Speed warning, lane keep assist, front assist, drowsiness, and I can just turn them off. That's it. The bane of our lives in modern day cars is the fact that you get loads of beeps and bongs coming into the cabin, and then you have to go through menu after menu after menu to shut them off. No, I can touch a button here, touch a button here, and touch another one on the steering wheel. It's that simple. Absolutely love it. And we have got other things as well for things like preconditioning the battery, ready for charging, turning off the lane keep assist, your auto hold, recirculation, and then there is a dedicated vehicle one as well that you can go through the vehicle settings. You can also pull down from the top to have more shortcut buttons here. But what I love, if I hit the plus button, I can adjust them. I can change how I want this. So let's go with, oh, I don't know. Maps, sound, last destination. We got charging. Just want to pick something that's not up there. So let's go with hotspot. Press and hold. And I don't want my address book, so let's swap them over. Done. That's it. So I can configure this to how I want it with these little extra shortcuts. That is just really cool. And as I mentioned, we have got the shortcut buttons lower down. Now to go to the climate control, you can use the voice activation system. I will be honest, I've not really bothered to do so. But when you hit the climate button, it brings up the climate screen. And it's really easy actually. All the icons, they got a really nice size to them. They are responsive. You can do the direction over here. Again, really nice. You got things like warm my hands, warm my feet, fresh air for the air con. But this is the thing that I do like. If I press the climate button again, I go back to my previous screen. That's something I really do love. And more and more manufacturers need to kind of look at this system for some of these shortcuts. Because when I got Apple CarPlay going and it's working really well, but I want to adjust the fan strength, or I want to kind of change where it's pointing, I can just press that, tap that, and then press it again, and I've gone back to where I was. This is actually one of the few infotainment systems where everything has been thought out. So well done, Skoda. I would just love to see this screen just tilted towards myself, just to make the cabin feel a little bit more driver-centric. And I will mention that there is a big on-off button here, which is touch-sensitive, just below. And we have got a little kind of rocker here, which is touch-sensitive for the volume. So it's not for the temperature that we have seen on other cars from, say, Volkswagen with the ID3. So yeah, when it comes to being sat here in the front of the Elroq, this is a really lovely interior. The infotainment system works. The curry spaces, for the most part, are really decent. And the quality in here is also a big step up. I recently tested an Audi Q6 e-tron. That was over £75,000. This car feels like it has a better interior than that premium SUV. This just feels so well thought out, incredibly comfortable, and it is just a lovely place to be. However, I am going to have to leave the front of the Elroq now because we need to see what it's like for rear passengers. Sat in the back of the Elroq, this is actually a very spacious and comfortable place to be, and it does have some quite unique features. Now, firstly, getting in and out of the back of the Elroq is really easy because the doors open nice and wide, and you have got grab handles to assist you getting in and out. So that is very handy. Now, that driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got a good amount of knee room. I can just about get my feet underneath the driver's seat if I want to stretch out a little bit, but headroom is also really good. So that actually means a couple of 6-footers could sit in the back of the Elroq for a medium to possibly long distance journey, and they should arrive at their destination feeling refreshed and relaxed. I think at a push you could get 3 adults back here as long as they're not as broad as me, but it should be fine for kids. Now, speaking of kids, we have got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats, and gone are the actual kind of plastic covers that used to pull out. We now just lift them down, or I should say pull them down, and it exposes the ISOFIX bar to make it really easy to affix a child seat. I will also mention that the front passenger seat also comes with ISOFIX bars, so again, that's actually really handy if you want to have your child seat up front. And then when it comes to storage cubbies, it's actually pretty good. We've got some decent sized door pockets. We can get a medium sized bottle of drink in there. But unlike the front, they're not lined with any fabric or rubber. And then we have got your aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the seats. And then we've got an extra pocket there for your mobile phone. So that is actually very handy. And we've also got, on this particular car, a little tray area with a couple of cup holders that you can kind of pull and flick them forward. So that's actually quite handy to put your drink in there. And then we have got your armrest, which comes down and actually has a cover here on the front where if you lift it up, it does expose a couple of extra cup holders and a little kind of socket there that perhaps you could put something in to hold a tablet in place. And what's also surprising is that we have got through loading into the boot area, even though it is a 60-40 split with the rear seats. So that is a pleasant surprise there. And then when it comes to kind of extra features, we have got a couple of vents. However, we haven't got any USB-C charging inputs back here. So you might have to go up to a higher trim level or look at kind of speccing one of the tech packs for this car. But as standard, yeah, you don't get your USB-Cs. And then when we've got things like the windows, they are really lovely and wide. You get a lot of light coming in. They do open all the way down as well, but I will say there is a little bit of a drop in quality back here. So we have got hard scratchy plastic on top of the doors, but we still have the fabric on the door cards here, and we have got it here as well on the seats with a bit of leatherette in the center. So yeah, when it comes to kind of the space in here, it is actually really good. It is just lacking in a couple of features that I would like to see on this type of car and at this spec level, especially with things like USB-C charging inputs. But I do love the cute little kind of tray area here. But if you are going to have someone sat in the center, you can remove that, which is very easy to do so. And even then, you've got hardly any kind of transmission tunnel coming through. It is literally just like this tiny little bump. Of course, this is an electric vehicle. So yeah, it's actually very spacious and comfortable. It has some quirky features, but like I said, it is missing a couple of features that you would see in other cars. But like I said, it is lovely and spacious back here and taking full advantage of that classic SUV design. And on that note, I think it's time that we leave the rear seats and we see what it's like in the boot. Opening the boot of the Elroq presents you with 470 litres of space, which is actually very decent for this segment of car, and even beats the Kia EV3. Granted, yes, it is by 10 litres. But once you've got the boot open, you are presented with a nice wide square load area. You should be able to get a large suitcase in there, or a few weekend bags, or possibly carry-ons, and it should be able to deal with a week's shopping. What I love as well is that there is no boot lip to navigate over, and also the boot level is actually quite low, so it should be easy for dogs to jump in and out of, or if you have to load any large bulky items such as a wheelchair or mobility scooter. Now, with this being a Skoda, it is not devoid of features. There are plenty of them. So as I mentioned, we have got the through loading into the rear passenger area, even though it is a 60-40 split in the seats. We have got your tethering hooks, we have got a 12-volt socket, we've got some fold down shopping hooks as well, which are very handy. We've got various little shelves here which are perfect for storing items, and they're not going to roll around on the boot floor. Now, this particular car has got the transport pack added to it, so basically it means I've got this like boot floor here which is reversible, so it's hard and rubbery on this side, but it is cloth on the other side. We have got plenty of underfloor storage, perfect for your cables, as well as some kind of extra compartments here. We have got your little kind of Velcro dividers here, which I think are perfect if you want to hold items in place, like a flat screen TV. That way it just, yeah, stays there using the Velcro. I always used to do a demonstration when I worked at Skoda, and I put a sandwich in there. I know it was a bit daft, but it kind of showed how it worked. And then we have got things like a couple of levels, so we can lower down the parcel shelf or tuck it behind if you need to load any taller objects into the boot area. Disappointingly, you can't quite put it underneath the boot floor, but with all the other features you've got on the Elroq, you are forgiven. And then when it comes to putting the seats down, you have an almost flat load area, but there is a little bit of a lip to navigate over if you do intend to load any large bulky items into the back of the Elroq. So yeah, when it comes to the figures, it is actually very decent. When it comes to the features, even more so. And yeah, you can even go for an additional pack where you get nutting underneath the parcel shelf, because you can put your cable in there. Because the only thing that is a bit disappointing on the Elroq is that you don't get a frunk, and that's where the EV3 does trump the Elroq here. But I do think this is a very decent boot space, and it is trumping a lot of its rivals. I know I've said that word numerous times, with all the features that you get in it. So yeah, this is actually a really strong area for the Elroq. But you know what? I think it's time that we get the boot down and we take the Elroq out there on the road and see how it gets on. So once you get going in the Elroq, first impressions are really positive. This is a very comfortable and easy car to drive, and also, like the Audi Q6 I reviewed recently, even though this is an SUV and you sit higher up than you will do in a traditional hatchback, you do sit low down in the car, so it feels like you're encased by a lot of metal, and it does feel safe. So that's something you definitely want from your car. Now, when it comes to visibility, it is actually really good. Because of that raised seated position, I got a wonderful commanding view of the road ahead. And of course, this being an EV, you can't quite judge where the front of the car is because of that sloping bonnet line. But the entry-level car does come with a reversing camera as standard, but this SEL trim does come with front and rear parking sensors and a reversing camera, so that will definitely come in handy when it comes to parking. Then the A-pillars are actually not as thick and chunky as I was expecting, and I've had no issues looking around them at any junctions. The wing mirrors are of a lovely shape and size, and I will say they are surprisingly big, and I have got blind spot monitoring, which is very handy. And then when I look over my shoulder, I do find that the C-pillar is surprisingly thin as well, so it doesn't create too much of a blind spot. But like I said, I've got that blind spot monitoring, and then rear visibility is actually really good. I've got no obstructions from the rear headrests, and I will say a couple of rivals have got a slightly larger rear screen, but like I said, all cars come with a reversing camera, so when it comes to parking, if you are reversing into a parking bay, you'll have no issues whatsoever. So yeah, first impressions of the Elroq once you get driving are massively impressive. This feels just bloody lovely, and it's amazing how far Skoda have come along in the 5 years they've been away from the channel. Now, when it comes to trim levels in the Elroq range, you've got 5 to choose from, but I will say that whichever trim level you go for will dictate which battery size you have available to you. So it starts off with the entry level SE, and you will have access to only the 50, the smallest battery. You then move up to the SEL, which is what I've got here, and then you have access to the middle size battery, the 60. You then have the Edition and the Sport line, and there you have access to the larger 85, but also the 60 battery. And then there's the top of the range VRS, which, yes, you've guessed it, you'll only have access to the 85, the largest battery. Now, personally, I would recommend looking at the SEL or the Edition. The SEL, because I do think the 60 is the sweet spot. It's the battery to go for, and I'll talk about range and performance in the next section. But if you want the maximum range you can get out of the Elroq, then by all means go for the Edition, because you can't get it with the SEL. But because I think the 60 is the one to go for, I do say look at the SEL, add some option packs, and then kind of personalize the car to how you want it. But like I said, if you want to have the most range, then look at the Edition and do the same thing. Now, when it comes to powering the Elroq, as I just mentioned, there are 3 battery sizes available for you. However, depending on the trim level you go for, will dictate which battery size you can have. So I will put everything on screen in a second, but I am going to mention I'm going to include the VRS, but I won't be able to tell you what the performance figures are at this moment in time, because there is an embargo in place, and I know that on Monday, and I'm filming on the Saturday, on the upcoming Monday that embargo is lifted, so that box will all be filled in for you. So I'm going to whack them on screen now for you, but I will say, even with the entry level 50, the performance is really decent. You have got 168 brake horsepower and 310 Newton meters of torque. You got a 0 to 62 time with that 50 of 9 seconds, which I think is pretty decent for this type of car, and a claimed range from Skoda of up to 232 miles. Moving up to the 60, which is what I've got here, I've got 201 brake horsepower and again 310 Newton meters of torque, and a 0 to 62 time of 8 seconds. Again, very decent because I have got the larger battery. Now, when it comes to claimed range, Skoda say I should have up to 265 miles, which again, I think is pretty decent. And when I've charged this car to 100%, it has gone pretty close. I've had a claimed 244 miles, which I think is very impressive. And then you've got the largest battery you can have for the most range, the 85. Now, when it comes to power, with the kind of family-friendly versions of the Elroq, you've got 282 brake horsepower and 545 Newton meters of torque. So you have got a 0 to 62 time of 6.6 seconds, but for the VRS, and this has been published already, that drops to 5.4 seconds. That is very impressive. And then when it comes to range, so with the family-friendly version, it should be up to 360 miles. With the VRS, it drops a little bit, of course, because of that performance, down to, well, 339, which I still think is very impressive. And then when it comes to things like efficiency, what Skoda claim is that the kind of 50 and 60 should get around 3.9 miles to kilowatt hour. And I do believe them, because I've been getting on a regular basis between 3.8 and about 4.3 miles per kilowatt hour, and I was even getting 3.9 on the motorway, and I personally think that is awesome in this type of car. What I like as well is when it comes to that performance, it's just very instant, even in normal mode like I'm in now. And I think it's the perfect amount of performance for this type of car. It's one of the reasons why I do recommend going for the 60 battery. The other reason as well is because it brings the cost of the car down a bit. It means you can add a little bit more. You can add more option packs, which do get quite expensive depending on what you want to add to the car, and it will keep it under that £40,000. But that's my personal opinion. So yeah, going with the SEL with this 60, I think it's the perfect all-rounder. I have done a couple of long journeys in this particular car, and yes, I have had to charge up, but as we'll go on to in a moment, when it comes to charging speeds, it is actually very decent, and it does mean you can travel quite a few miles. I do apologise for my camera shutting off. You can travel quite a few miles and then not spend too much time at the charger topping up your battery. So yeah, I do love the fact that you've got plenty of options available to you when it comes to the battery size, when it comes to range, and you can really tailor the perfect Elroq for yourself. And it shouldn't cost you the earth either. Now, when it comes to charging and brake regeneration in the Elroq, I'm going to say it's pretty good, but when it comes to the brake regeneration, it's not quite strong enough to be full one pedal driving. Now, one thing I'm a bit kind of curious about is that I've got the SEL trim, which should come with some flappy paddles on the back of the steering wheel in order to adjust the brake regeneration, but I haven't got them. So really, the only thing I can say is that when it comes to brake regen, if you go to the gear lever, there is a B mode there, and it does actually give you quite a strong amount of brake regeneration. Only thing that's a bit disappointing is that it doesn't bring you to a complete stop. You have a very slow crawl. But like I said, I can't find anything to kind of adjust the brake regen if I don't want to put it in B mode. The other thing with B mode as well is that you can't use things like radar guided cruise control, so that's just something to be aware of there. But I am a little bit surprised that I haven't got these flappy paddles. But like I said, it is actually pretty strong, but it just doesn't feel like proper one pedal driving, so that is a little bit disappointing, especially when compared to its rivals such as the Kia EV3, which does give you that full iPedal one pedal driving experience. But then we move on to the charging rates of the Elroq, and depending on which battery you go for will dictate the kind of speed or DC charging speed for you. So if you go, and I will put these on screen now for you, with the 50, you have a maximum of 145 kilowatts of charging, which I actually think is pretty bloody good for the kind of smallest battery. It does then increase to 165 kilowatts for the 60 and 175 kilowatts for the 85, and then 185 kilowatts for the VRS. But here's the thing, when it comes to kind of going from 10 to 80%, it's all pretty much the same. It's around 24 to 28 minutes depending on which battery you go for. So yeah, when it comes to the actual charging rates, I actually think it's very impressive for this type of car. Don't forget, this is not a massive SUV. This is technically a small family SUV that's going to spend most of its life commuting to work and back, doing the weekly shop. It's not really one that's going to be doing loads of motorway miles, but it's really nice to see that you have got that ability to rapid charge. And also, like I said, you've got some pretty decent brake regeneration, but I just wish it was a bit stronger. I wish you had that full one pedal driving experience, and I did know a way to kind of adjust the brake regen for everyday driving. So yeah, it's kind of pretty good all round, I'll say. Now, something I will just quickly mention is that I believe on the SEL trim and upwards, so essentially the 60 and 85 batteries, you have got the choice to opt for a optional heat pump on the car. So what about the Elroq's ride and refinement? Well, I'm gonna say it's actually really good. Now, the SE and SEL come with 19-inch wheels as standard. You can opt for optional 20s. but I do recommend sticking with the 19s. Now, if you go for the VRS, they start at 20s and move up to 21s, but it deals with a lot of the bumps and imperfections really well and in a very mature manner. I'm driving through the local village where I do my kind of suspension and ride test, and it's dealing with the bumps and imperfections just, yeah, in such a grown-up way. Most of the time you can hear them, but you cannot feel them. The only thing I will say is that you do feel them if you go over a large pothole or manhole cover. You will feel a bit more of a boom and a jolt come through. So that's just something to be aware of there. So here is the big question when it comes to the ride comfort. Does it beat the Kia EV3, which I think is the benchmark car for this segment? And the simple answer is no, but it is so close. I mean, the Kia just wafts over those bumps and imperfections in such a lovely way. But the only thing with the Elroq is that some of those larger bumps and imperfections, they just come through into the cabin, and you can just kind of feel them and hear them a bit more than you can do in the EV3. But for everyday driving, you'll have no issues with the Elroq whatsoever. It has been a really lovely car to drive, and like I said, it feels very grown up, very mature in how it deals with those bumps and imperfections. And then we move on to the refinement, which at low speed is just sublime. It's so quiet in here, and if I just put my foot down and we increase speed and we get ourselves up to 60 miles per hour, again, it's really bloody lovely. I've got a tiny bit of wind noise coming off the A-pillar. However, I will say it is actually a very gusty day today, so there could be wind actually just hitting the side of the car. But I got a little bit of tyre roar coming into the cabin, and then a bit of wind noise there. That's it. Like I said earlier, I have done a few long trips in the Elroq, going from Scunthorpe down to London and back again, through all manner of roads, through rush hour traffic, on the motorway, and this thing is just perfect for all conditions. It really is that lovely. Now, I've got the standard stereo system in this particular car. There is an upgrade which you can get, the Canton sound system, and I remember having that on my old Octavia VRS. Oh, feels like a lifetime ago, back in 2013, and it's actually, I think, a really good sound system, but I've not heard it in the Elroq. But I can imagine it being just a really lovely system, and it will definitely help with kind of taking away those outside noises with the wind and any tyre roar coming through. But even this standard system has been really lovely. Just don't go nuts with the bass, because you can get a bit of distortion come through. So yeah, when it comes to the ride and refinement in the Elroq, it is really good, but it's just literally like that far away from being on a par with the EV3. It really is that impressive. I was not expecting this from a Skoda, and I know how good Skodas are. So what about the Elroq's handling? Well, firstly, I do like the feel of the steering wheel and the size. It feels very lovely in my hands, but it doesn't feel very sporty in any way, shape or form. There's no perforated leather, there's no flat bottom to it. It feels like a regular steering wheel, but it does feel really lovely in my hands. And when it comes to the handling, I'm going to say it's really, really lovely. Even in normal mode, there is a bit of weight in the steering, so you do feel connected to the car, and it means it's perfect for everyday driving, and you do have that connection and feedback that you probably weren't experiencing. And it doesn't feel in any way over assisted. Everything feels nice and tight and responsive, and again, it's perfect for everyday driving. Now with the drive modes, I will mention it, you have got a sport mode for the steering. It does add a little bit of weight to it, but it really is, yeah, it's very minute. I'd basically say just keep it in normal mode. But when it comes to that connection with the car, I know what the front wheels are doing. So for everyday driving, yeah, you're going to have no issues whatsoever. And when you push the Elroq, there is a little bit of lean and roll, but it does feel very composed. And when it comes to things like parking, because you've got that little bit of weight there, yes, you might just need to put a bit more effort in when you are perhaps doing like a 3-point turn, or if you are reversing or turning into a tight parking space. But it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And yeah, I mean, another bonus is that it has a very good, bloody hell, turning circle. I think it is under 11 meters. So yeah, just like the Kia EV3, which is essentially what the Elroq is gunning for, you do feel connected to the car. I can push it in the corners with some confidence. Like I said, there is a little bit of roll and lean there, but this is the family-friendly version of the Elroq. Now, if you do go for one of the higher trim levels, you can get DCC or dynamic chassis control. And what that means is when you are driving, say, on the motorway, it becomes incredibly comfortable and actually quite floaty. But when you do put it into sport mode, it should firm things up. And with the sport line and of course the upcoming VRS, it will firm the suspension as well to give you that sporty feel to the car. And you'll probably feel a bit more from the bumps and imperfections. So yeah, when it comes to the ride, the refinement and the handling of the Elroq, it all works so lovely together, just like the EV3. It's just a bit of a shame that when it comes to the ride quality, it just doesn't deal with those kind of bigger bumps and imperfections as well as its Korean rival. But it is, like I said, it's so close. It really is. So with my time in the Elroq, what have been some of the highlights and some of the little niggles I need to let you guys know about? Well, highlights I do think are the kind of standard levels of equipment, especially when it comes to safety. Now, one thing I do like is that in other brands, if you were to say stray 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, you get a lot of bongs coming into the cabin, and that can be quite intrusive. But in the Elroq, it is really quiet. If anything, you just hear this faint little bong in the background, but what you get is with the little speed sign, you get a little exclamation mark next to it to let you know you're speeding, and it just kind of flashes at you. So if anything, there might be some people out there that think it's actually a bit too quiet, but take a test drive and see what you think. And then something I mentioned earlier in regards to kind of standard equipment is the fact that we got a stalk here on the steering column for your cruise control. However, there is a rocker switch on the top of it that says distance, and it is to adjust your distance if you had radar guided cruise control, which I don't. So I found that to be really kind of disappointing, because I saw it and I thought, ooh, I have got radar guided cruise control. That will make my journey going from Scunthorpe to London a lot more relaxing. And then when I kind of tweaked it and set it, it says ACC is not enabled. So that was really quite disappointing, especially as this car comes with something that is kind of linked to ACC, and that is the pre-sense system. Now this is actually a positive, and I do love it on Volkswagen Group cars, and essentially it kind of works in conjunction with the built-in sat-nav, is that when you're driving along and not with the cruise control on, and you're approaching, say, a roundabout or a T-junction, it knows it's coming up. So what it does is it tells you on the screen what kind of junction it is, whether it's a roundabout or perhaps a twisty road, and then it tells you to take your foot off the accelerator, and it will use its own kind of regen braking system to slow the car down. It won't bring you to a complete stop, but it just starts the process for you, and that's something I really do love on Volkswagen Group cars. I remember experiencing it about 5-6 years ago in a Volkswagen Golf, and I just really do like it. It works brilliantly on an EV because it acts as regen braking. So that's something I really do like. And then, well, other highlights. I'm just gonna have to say the car itself. It's been an absolute joy to drive. I'm sorry if you heard a knocking now. I think I just hit a very large bumblebee. But yeah, this car has just been an absolute pleasure. Something I really do like as well, if you are on a longer journey, and I mentioned this as well, is the fact that there is a footrest on the right hand side for your right foot. I love that. It feels so alien, but it feels so right. The last time I saw a footrest on the right hand side for your braking and accelerator foot was in a Mark II Skoda Octavia. That shows us how long ago I remember seeing that system, and it was absolutely brilliant. But other than that, yeah, the Elroq itself has just been a massive highlight. It's practical, spacious, drives really well. I mean, I think it's just time to move on to the conclusion. So, what are my thoughts on the new Skoda Elroq? Well, at the beginning of this review, I asked two big questions. What is the car like? And is it another case of Skoda being late to the game, but coming out with a class best winner? Well, regarding the car itself, I think Skoda have done an amazing job with it. I do love the new kind of styling direction that Skoda are going. I wish they had done something a little bit different to the rear to make it a bit more individual and a bit more different to the Enyaq, because now it looks like the Enyaq's little brother, but however the facelifted Enyaq now looks like the Elroq's big brother. But it is kind of having this new family face that we are seeing. It is a very practical car, whether it be for rear passengers and also in the boot. These are traits that we've come to know and love from Skoda. Then you got all the little simply clever highlights which really do stand out, and it really does surprise me that other manufacturers haven't, in the nicest way, copied or imitated Skoda with their own ideas. They just seem to be kind of, I don't know, withdrawn when it comes to these clever little features. And then we got things like the battery choices, the trim levels to choose from. You can really pick the Elroq that you want and love, and then you can add option packs on top to really personalize it for you, so you can have everything that you want and need. And then comes that second question: are they late to the game, and have they brought a winner? Well, yes, they are late to the game, because this is a hugely competitive segment, but they've not quite got the winner. It's literally this far off the Kia EV3. That is the class best for a reason. As a driving package, in terms of everything on the car, it is immensely capable, but it's not going to be for everyone. It's got a very unique interior. It's got very striking looks to it, which are not going to be to everyone's taste. And the Elroq is here to mop up those customers. Because if somebody doesn't like the EV3, or if you don't like the looks of the EV3, go for the Elroq. This will be the perfect second choice, or which will be your first choice. So yeah, the new Skoda Elroq, it's an absolutely impressive car. It really is, in all facets. But if the Kia EV3 is a 5-star car, this is a 4.9. That's how close it is between them. And if you were to give me £40,000 and tell me to go out and buy an EV SUV, and these are my two choices, this and an EV3, I would be spending a hell of a lot of time making my decision, because right now I would be torn. I really would. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the new Skoda Elroq. As always, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. If you've got any questions about the Elroq and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below and I will do my utmost to answer them for you. Of course, don't forget to follow on social media. I am on Facebook, Instagram and X for additional content. And yeah, it's an absolutely wonderful welcome back for Skoda to the channel, and what a car to start it off with. This is arguably one of their best cars, but saying that, I will need to drive more of them. So let's hope we'll see more Skodas on the channel. And on that note, I hope you all have a wonderful day and I will catch you all in the next video. So take care everybody, and bye-bye.